to order on Monday, October 21st, the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Our first item of business is approval of the agenda. The agenda's been published. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Cummings moved. Wolf seconds. Did I get that right? Okay.
Sure.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Second item is approval of our October 7th, 2019 minutes. Muse moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Johnson seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That moves us to our business items. Our first item of business is this 2019-293 JT City of Coon Rapids 2040 Comprehensive Plan and Comprehensive Sewer Plan. Eric Wychek. Mr. Wychek, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Chair Bento. My name is Eric Wychek. I am the sector representative for Districts 2, 9, and 10 in local planning assistance within the Community Development Division. I'd like to present to you the Coon Rapids 2040 Comprehensive Plan today. I'd like to especially thank Matt Brown, the Economic Development Director for Coon Rapids. He's not able to be here today, and he wished he could be here. This map corresponds with Figure 1 within the staff report. It's the location of the regional system components within the city of Coon Rapids. When it comes to regional parks, park reserves, and special recreation features located within the city, we have Bunker Hills and Coon Rapids Dam Regional Parks. Regional trails located within the city include Coon Creek and the Mississippi River Regional Trails. The plan accurately reflects the regional functional classification map of A minor arterials and has delineated major and minor collector roads. The plan incorporates existing transit ways that are part of the current revenue scenario within the transportation policy plan, and that would include the North Star commuter rail station. All wastewater generated within the city is conveyed through 4 interceptors, and they are all treated, all of that wastewater is treated at the Metropolitan Plant in St. Paul. 5 MSP 2040 has designated the city as suburban. Coon Rapids is located along the southwestern border of Anoka County. It is surrounded by the communities of Andover, Ham Lake, Blaine, Fridley, Brooklyn Park, Champlin, and Anoka. Table 1, also within your staff report, shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts the city will grow by 7,300 people, representing 3,800 households. There will be an increase of 3,800 jobs in the city in the same time frame. Table 2 from the staff report, shown here, illustrates the planned residential density in the suburban area of the city. The overall density for guided residential land is expected to be between 5.79 dwelling units per acre and 22.07 units per acre. Communities with the suburban designation under Thrive are expected to plan for forecasted population and household growth at overall average densities of 5 units per acre for new development and redevelopment. Coon Rapids 2040 plan is consistent with this policy. The city's existing land use map refers to Figure 3 in the staff report. 57% of the city is residential. Commercial and office is 7% of the city. Industrial areas, 4%. And most of the commercial and office and industrial areas are located along the transportation corridors. Approximately 18% of the city is parks and open space. The city's future land use map can be found in Figure 4 in the staff report. In total, the city identifies around 770 acres of land for redevelopment. A lot of that redevelopment land is located along State Highway 10. And The city identifies 11 potential areas for redevelopment, and most of those areas are commercial mixed use and residential mixed use opportunities located along that transportation corridor. The residential mixed-use land use designation identified for the North Star Riverdale commuter station carries a transit-oriented development overlay, which guides land at slightly higher densities to meet the requirements of the transportation policy plan. In that area, the residential density near the station is guided at between 20 and 50 units per acre, with a 70% share of residential land uses. The Metropolitan Council staff find that the plan conforms to metropolitan system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units and affected jurisdictions. On Tuesday, October 22nd, tomorrow, the Environmental Services staff will present to the Environment Committee. This item will be on the Metropolitan Council agenda for November 13th. And the proposed action is here, which is to authorize the City of Coon Rapids to place its 2048 comprehensive plan into effect, advise the city to implement the advisory comments within the staff report, and advise the city to adopt the Mississippi River Critical Corridor Area Plan within 60 days after receiving final DNR approval. I'm happy to answer questions you might have.
Any questions? Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Chambliss moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Wolf. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Wychuk. We'll move on to Falcon Heights.
Great.
I think there's somebody here who has a connection to Falcon Heights.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, sadly, again, Falcon Heights staff couldn't make it tonight, but I did want to thank Justin Markin, the community development coordinator for the city of Falcon Heights. We worked quite closely with him to get this plan over the finish line. But we do have the former mayor of Falcon Heights in attendance, so I'm sure we'd like to thank him. He was certainly part of this effort. You'll find that the regional systems for Falcon Heights are within Figure 1 of your staff report. When it comes to parks, or regional parks and trails, we have a Mississippi Como Regional Trail Search Corridor located in the southern portion of the city. There are no state or federal recreation lands and no regional parks within the city. In terms of the regional transportation system components, the plan accurately reflects regional functional classification. Larpenteur and Snelling Avenues are A minor augmenters, and Cleveland Avenue is an A minor reliever. Como, Fairview, and Hamlin Avenues are minor arterials, and the city has no minor collectors. The plan does show that the city is within Market Area 2, Transit Market Area, and this includes the A-Line BRT that runs north and south along Snelling Avenue. It maps and discusses the location of existing Metro Transit and University of Minnesota transit routes. And also, the plan also notes that the city is served by Transit Link and Metro Mobility Services. The city is served by 2 Metropolitan Council wastewater interceptors, and all flow is treated at the Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant in St. Paul. 5 MSP 2040 has designated the city of Falcon Heights as urban. It is located in the west central Ramsey County. It is surrounded by the communities of Roseville, St. Paul, and Lauderdale. Table 1 within your staff report shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts that the city's population will not change. However, the city is requesting a household and employment forecast to reflect its land supply in the years to come. The council has agreed to the forecast revision, and there will be an increase of 60 households and 600 jobs in the city during this time frame. Please note that there's a separate action within the CDC recommendation related to revising these forecasts and the affordable housing need allocation. When it comes to density, this is detailed in Table 2 of the staff report. The overall density for guided residential land is expected to be between 13.55 units per acre and 46 units per acre. Communities with the urban designation under Thrive are expected to plan for forecasted population and household growth at overall average densities of at least 10 units per acre. Falcon Heights plan is consistent with this policy. Falcon Heights is a little bit unique when it comes to cities in our metro. There's 30% of the city is residential, but we have a very high percentage of the city is what would be deemed institutional or agricultural, and this is due to the state of Minnesota fairgrounds being located within Falcon Heights, and also the U of M agricultural fields located in the northern portion of the city. Approximately 2% of the city is parks and open space. The future land use map is located in Figure 4 of the staff report. In Figure 9, areas of potential change in the plan, or Figure 5 within the report, identifies potential redevelopment areas that are concentrated along Larpenter Avenue, where mixed-use residential and mixed-use residential TOD land uses are identified. In total, the redevelopment opportunities within the city amount to approximately 12.6 acres of land. I should also like to note that the city is planning for appropriate densities around the A-line BRT route, which the TPP requires an average of 15 residential units per acre, and the city is planning for that along Snelling there. I wanted to highlight one particular part of the plan that's really interesting, and I'm sure that Councilmember Lindstrom can speak to this. Appendix E of the plan includes the city's resilience analysis. Falcon Heights is a leader when it comes to metropolitan cities planning for climate change and planning for resilience. It's one of a small number of cities, 15 cities in total within the state of Minnesota, that are Green Step 5 cities, so the fifth stage of Green Step, which is the program administered by the MPCA. It's a voluntary program where communities achieve their sustainability and quality of life goals through a volunteer improvement program. There's a whole suite of information within this appendix that's worth looking at if you have the time, but I just wanted to recognize Falcon Heights' efforts in this area. Council staff Council staff have found that the plan conforms to metropolitan system plans, is consistent with council policies with the proposed forecast changes, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units in affected jurisdictions. This plan also will be at the Environment Committee tomorrow, October 22nd, and at the Metropolitan Council, November 13th. Proposed actions are to authorize the City of Falcon Heights to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, to revise the city forecast upward as shown in Table 1 of the review record, revise the city's affordable housing need to 11, and advise the city to implement the advisory comments within the staff report. Quite happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
Lindstrom moves, Cummings seconds. Any discussion? Mr.
Only that
Councilman
I'll add on that my kudos as well to Justin Marcon, who put a lot of work into this, as well as our city administrator and Planning Commission, of course, but also the Environment Committee looked at this probably just as close, honestly, as the Planning Commission. Spent several committee meetings looking at the comp plan in great detail and filtering resiliency and sustainability throughout the entire document, as well as attaching the resiliency analysis that we had done a few years back. So we looked at it with a fine-tooth comb, and I think it shows. Thank you.
Councilmember Lindstrom, did you have anything to do with the bike infrastructure piece?
Yes.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah. So there's a nice bike lane along Como Avenue, of course, but also we found that a few years back there was not really great bike infrastructure connections between the northern part of the metro or the northern part of our area, at least Roseville, and Minneapolis, St. Paul to the south. So it's probably been 5 years or so now. We've put in the what's called the Northeast Urban Campus Connector. So it connects the jobs and the residents in Roseville and Rosedale to Minneapolis and points south. It's beautiful bike trail along with a pedestrian trail.
That's great. That's great. Any questions of either Mr. Wycheck or Councilmember Lindstrom? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Wycheck.
Thank you.
Next, we have 2019-295 City of Corcoran 2040 Comp Plan and Comprehensive Sewer Plan. Freya Thaman, am I saying
Freya
that
Thaman,
correctly?
yes.
Thaman? Okay, thank you.
Good
Ms.
afternoon,
Thaman.
Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Freya Thaman, and I'm the SEC representative for District 1, and I'll be presenting the City of Corcoran's 2040 Comprehensive Plan today. The city staff was unable to attend today, but I did want to recognize City Administrator Brad Martins, as well as Planning and Zoning staff Kendra Lindahl and Mike Pritchard, who put a lot of time and effort and really appreciated their coordination throughout this process. So the city of Corcoran is located in northwest Hennepin County, and it's surrounded by the communities of Rogers, Dayton, Maple Grove, Plymouth, Medina, Independence, Greenfield, and Hanover. Thrive has designated Corcoran within 2 community designations. The majority of the city is in the diversified rural designation, and then there are areas in the east and in the south that are in the emerging suburban edge designation. As mentioned, Corcoran is primarily rural, and it's a community that just recently started to receive regional wastewater services in 2015. Regional wastewater is treated at the Columbus Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant in St. Paul. It is shown here in terms of the regional park system components in the city. Lake Independence Regional Trail is on the west side of the city, and then on the east side of the city, there's the North-South 1 Regional Trail Search Corridor. The very southern part of the city is Highway 55. As shown here and in Table 1 of the review record, between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts that the city will grow by 4,600 people, representing 2,200 households, and that there will be an increase of 600 jobs in the city during this time period. Throughout the comprehensive planning process, council and city staff agreed to an upward revision of the sewer service forecasts, which is shown in Table 2 of the staff report and reflects residential development that would be served by Metro Plant in St. Paul. This change adjusted the city's affordable housing need allocation, which was revised to 377 units. This table, which is Table 3 of the staff report, shows the planned residential density in the emerging suburban edge area of the city. These areas are expected to plan for densities of 3 to 5 units an acre for newly sewered residential development. And as shown here, the planned residential density is expected to be between 3.35 and 6.4 units per acre, which is consistent with council policy for emerging suburban edge communities. As mentioned, the remaining part of Corcoran is in the diversified rural designation and is expected to plan for densities of 4 units per 40 acres, and the city's plan is also consistent with that rural policy. This figure shows the existing land uses in Corcoran. About 80% of the land uses in Corcoran are agricultural and rural, which are shown in green here. Single-family residential is shown in yellow, and then there's a small amount of commercial and industrial limited within the city. Corcoran has an abundance of high-quality natural resources, and one of the goals in the plan is to preserve the highest quality natural resources as identified in the city's natural resource inventory. This figure is figure 4 of the staff report. It's the city's future land use map. Most of the city is designated as rural agricultural, shown in green. The regionally sewered areas of the plan are in the east and in the south and include residential and mixed uses, business park, industrial, and public uses. The pink mixed use area includes future town center, which is envisioned to be a key growth area within the city. On this figure, in the southwest part of the city, there's an area that's identified as future study area. The plan's text and figures indicate that the method and timing of regional wastewater services to the southwest area will be determined as part of a future council study that's related to the new regional Pearl River wastewater treatment facility in Rogers. This study will begin in 2020, and then it will consider all options for providing regional wastewater service to this area of the city. Staff review found that the City of Corcoran's plan conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies with the proposed forecast changes, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units and affected jurisdictions. This plan is scheduled for tomorrow's Environment Committee meeting and then is on the agenda for the Metropolitan Council meeting on November 13th. So the proposed actions before you today are to authorize the City of Corcoran to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, to revise the city's sewer service forecast upwards as shown in Table 2 of the review record, and then to revise the city's 2021 through 2030 affordable housing need allocation to 337 units, and then to advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for forecasts, land use, and water supply. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Is there a motion? Oh, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Hi, thank you. Just a quick question. I was just kind of taken aback looking at the areas. Are there, it looks like there's really only one park in the city of Corcoran that's not a golf course, is that right?
One of the Madam Chair and council members, I know that Lions Park is the main park within the city.
Okay.
And then I do know that with the city's future planning, especially for that town center area that I had mentioned, that they're planning for new park elements within the city and growing that component. They've been primarily rural, and as they're growing, their plan has indicated consideration of new park areas, and especially in that new area where they envision growth in the town center.
Thank you.
So do we have a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, so moved.
Johnson moves.
Second.
Wolf seconds. Any discussion? Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Freya, I just want to thank you. The City of Corcoran worked really hard on this, but there was, I'll call it a comp plan hiccup. For all of you who've been in local government, you know that might cause you to go what. But for them, it was really an issue where that southwest corner that you see with the dots or hash mark, that really became an issue for the plan as far as how down the road it would service with its wastewater treatment. So at one point in a former plan, it had been going through Medina, and then that reversed itself earlier as Medina was changing its comp plan. And then there were other issues south of them that just for planning purposes in the moment, they couldn't go directly south into some new wastewater treatment options that maybe or will be coming out of the city of Colorado. But we knew with the eventual new wastewater treatment plant in Rogers, the Crow River plant, that at least for them, I think the disconnect between where they were at and where Met Council was at was just that, you know, that's not coming online yet. That's future. But for them, because they're a small community, and working with Landform, their planner in this case, they would have had to really undo a lot of their last comp plan and get into detail and drop down menus of things. And they were really trying to say, you know, we are not looking to expand in this area at all in the near future because we know it will eventually connect. So I really want to commend Freya and Janine Clancy and Kyle Colvin, and certainly Brad Martin's the administrator, and Mayor Thomas and staff, because we all really met and figured this one out. And Janine was phoned in to the situation, and I know community development staff really worked hard on this to come up with language that would help their community keep things kind of in place, because sorry, and I won't do this at the Met Council meeting, but it does, this is where Highway 55 intersects with this city. So at some point, this is a very important thing to signal to future commercial development that they're planning for this, and they didn't have to pull all that out. So anyway, hats off to Met Council staff for really helping to solve a problem and use, you know, common sense around coming up with sound language for future planning purposes. And I really appreciate the city, you know, working with us as well to find a workable solution. And so when it gets handed off to you, there was a lot of detail in this, but I'm really pleased with the way it came out. I know they're really pleased. And this is really why partnership works so well, because you guys are great here on staff to find solutions. So.
Well, and Councilmember Johnson, don't apologize and don't hesitate to share this at the full council meeting, because what you did with Corcoran is wisdom for all of us in terms of working with our cities and townships who sometimes have those challenges. You know, you modeled a great role in helping them get it resolved. So please don't apologize.
It's staff. I just say, can we meet? And they show up. And
Yeah.
but I do appreciate that, because some of our bigger cities have a lot of resources and professional staff members that do this every day at City Hall, and others need to call on resources that aren't cheap when they have limited budgets. So this was a win-win, and I really appreciate it. So thanks for putting up with me.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And we aren't through all of the comp plans yet, but I want to second what Councilmember Johnson said about the staff. Throughout this, all the staff, all of you have been really terrific in helping make sure that this process keeps moving. So thank you very much. It's a lot of work. Thank you. Next we have 2019-296 JT City of Arden Hills comp plan and comprehensive sewer plan, presented by Raya S. Smiley. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Smiley. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Great. Well, hello, I'm Raya Smiley. I am the sector representative for District 4 and in local planning assistance. I'm here to present Arden Hills 2040 comp plan for you. I also would like to let the committee know that city staff were to attend this committee, but I don't see them in the audience. So I guess they weren't able to, unfortunately. So before you today is the City of Arden Hills 2040 Comprehensive Plan. This map shows the location of the regional systems within the boundary of the City of Arden Hills. The system components within the city are highways I-35W and I-694, and there's an addition of a min-pass lane along 35W. There's also the Metro A-Line BRT extension. This is part of the increased revenue scenario. And also the I-35W North corridor. That's also part of the increased revenue scenario. There are RBTN Tier 1 alignments and corridors within the city, and as well as several wastewater meters and interceptors. Also, the park components within the City of Arden Hills are Tony Schmidt Regional Park, Highway 96 Regional Trail, Rice Creek North Regional Trail, and Lexington Avenue Parkway Regional Trail Search Corridor that runs along the eastern side of the city. Thrive MSP 2040 has designated the city as suburban. Arden Hills is located in the northwestern Ramsey County, and it is surrounded by the communities of Shoreview, Roseville, New Brighton, and Mounds View. Table 1, that is also in your staff report, shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts that the city will grow by 3,500 people, representing 1,400 households, and there will be an increase of 2,500 jobs in the city during the same time period. This is the table 2 on the staff report that shows the planned residential density for the city of Arden Hills. This is the suburban areas in the city of Arden Hills. The overall density for guided land is expected to be between 5 and 11.48 units per acre. Communities with a suburban designation by Thrive MSB 2040 are expected to plan for forecasted population growth at overall average densities of at least 5 units per acre and target opportunities for more intensive development near regional transit. Arden Hills plan is consistent with this policy. So the city's 2016 generalized land use map, this refers to figure 3 of your staff report. The existing and mostly developed land uses in the city of Arden Hills are predominantly residential. That's over 20% of the land uses. Over 35% of the city is, as marked in this map, undeveloped, and that represents the TCAP area that is 427 acres. That's shown here on the north part of the city. That's kind of a light green. The TCAP site was used by the federal government in the 40s to manufacture and test ammunitions for World War II, and since has stopped doing that. This is figure 4 of your staff report, which is the 2040 future land use of the city. Arden Hills is technically a fully developed community, and its growth accommodation is mostly through redevelopment. As shown here, a major part of the future land use plan involves the TCAP site with a mixture of different land uses, and the other areas of concentration for future development and redevelopment are also shown here. So these are the areas that see most of the change between now and 2040. So the proposed findings are that the plan, it conforms to the metropolitan system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units and affected jurisdictions. The meeting schedule is similar to previous plans, as that this plan will be going to the Environment Committee tomorrow on October 22nd, and Environmental Services staff will be presenting this plan. The plan is also scheduled to be on the Metropolitan Council's meeting on the November 13th. And with that, the proposed action in front of you is to authorize the City of Arden Hills to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect and advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for transportation, forecast, housing, and water supply. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
I'll be happy to make the motion to move this plan forward.
Is there a second?
Question, yeah.
I'm sorry? Oh, you have a question?
Yeah.
Well, can we get a second on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll wait.
second on the motion to approve first.
I'll second.
Okay, Wolf seconds. Okay, Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen.
So I know a number of us have received, probably all of us have received multiple times concerns regarding the original, the master plan of the city of Arden Hills, and also in the documents that were received in preparation for today, further information around the insufficient was highlighted in red in the number of affordable housing units and the opportunity to increase affordable housing units in the community. Just looking quickly on MN Compass for the demographics of this community, a little further information around that, seeing just a really low level of households comparatively to its neighbors with income under $100,000. So really high income comparatively to some of the communities around it. I'm curious to kind of hear more how and what is our role as the council of ensuring there is a really attainable housing, but even affordable housing in communities as it relates to their master plan, and then congruent between their master plans and the comp plans that come before us. So it's probably a question more for Lisa than I don't know. Wait, I'm going to pull that
I
back.
was
I'm going to
gonna
let you
defer
ladies
to
let me
her.
know what you just respond.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, council members, you're right, communities sometimes have plans that are out in process while they're reviewing or submitting to us their comprehensive plans, which are broader and more general in nature than you would see in a development proposal or in a master plan. Our jobs at the council is to review the comprehensive plan and what that plan's consistency is with our policies and our conformance with council's system plans. There are, as I think council members are aware, there are disagreements between the city and the property owner about the development of that site, which is currently being mediated, I think, through illegal avenues, and that is certainly an avenue that's available to property owners when they don't feel that their development proposal that they feel is consistent with a comprehensive plan is being able to move forward. So when we look at what the council's authorities are, they relate directly to review of the plan itself, the comprehensive plan, not to development proposals per se that would come out of that. And then when we do look at potential future actions that the city might take as far as the council is concerned, it would be as it relates to our regional systems and whether or not those systems are being either, one, underutilized, so they're not meeting our minimum densities with development proposals, or on the flip side, are having potential for system impacts on the negative or to the contrary. So development that might be premature or at higher densities in a localized situation that we may not be able to support in this current timing. Those are the types of impacts that come directly from development proposals themselves in which the council may get involved.
Can I follow up,
Yes.
Chair? Thank you. So in our in the joint business item, the full description on page 13, it outlines that, and maybe I'm reading into this, but it shares that the amount of affordable housing is insufficient. At least that's how I'm reading it, because there's a red highlight of the words insufficient. Could you share more about that? It's on figure 6 in the land guided for affordable housing section.
Madam Chair, council members, I have a black and white copy, so I'm going to pull up the color copy on our screens here.
I'm sorry, I don't have a color copy either.
Oh, thank you. So in figure 6, and this is a figure that you'll see in all of the, Madam Chair, sorry, council members. These figures we include for all communities that have a share of the region's affordable housing need. At the top, you'll see that their share in this case is 373 units. And then the table that shows the available acreage in this community, and then the minimum units possible based on their minimum density. So in this case, in that table, you'll see that it's 455 units that are possible. That line that you referenced, Councilmember Ellising Britsum, related to that sufficient and insufficient. When the letters are in black, that indicates that they're sufficient by more than 82 units. If they were insufficient, the letters would be in red and with a parentheses around them, signifying a deficit.
Thank you for that clarity. My last question is, when we look at affordability in comp plans and in communities, what's our agency if we're not seeing affordable housing being outlined in the way that we're looking to in these communities or as their master plans might outline.
Madam Chair, council members, the requirements for comprehensive planning to be consistent with the council's policies are outlined in our housing policy plan, and they include ensuring that a community has, and these come right out of statute. In particular, the completeness components are around addressing the existing housing needs in the community, addressing the projected housing need. In this case, this is the share of the region's affordable housing need, and then facilitating land use guiding that supports the potential development of that affordable housing, and then including an implementation plan that indicates how the city, what tools and fiscal devices the city would use to facilitate affordable housing development within their community. So we have the base requirements out of statute, and then the housing policy plan, policy consistency components in our in our housing policy plan that are also outlined in our local planning handbook for local governments. If a city does not address their existing housing need, like just is silent on it, doesn't address their projected housing need, doesn't include a housing implementation plan, their plan is considered incomplete until they at least have a component that does those elements. Acknowledges that there is existing housing needs of some sort, acknowledges affordable housing need allocation. They may or may not include all of the elements that we request of them. Sufficient land, for example, to support their affordable housing need allocation. That would be a consistency component. Similarly, they may not address, and we've seen this in some past plans, they may not address all of the commonly used tools and fiscal devices that cities have available to them, and we would consider that a consistency component, not a completeness component.
My last piece, given all the concerns that have been raised around the affordability plan, in general, my understanding is that it's 80% of AMI, which is really not getting to certainly attainable housing for people who really are in need. And the other pieces that community organizations and groups have raised, do you feel like this is a situation where it makes sense to say it's not complete or the plan is not congruent, or?
Madam Chair, council members, to the affordability, we actually have bands of affordability, and they're up to 30% AMI, 30 to 50 or 60, 60% AMI, then 60 to 80. And so as far as existing and projected housing need, communities are to acknowledge those bands of affordability and to peg their implementation plans to those bands of need. So that's a component that we do already break down, whereas in the past we hadn't. To whether or not a master development plan for a project proposal carries out the plan. It's not the council's authority or lane to enforce what's in a comprehensive plan. That really lies with both local residents through elections, property owners through wanting to carry out development proposals consistent with comprehensive plans if they disagree on that. There are multiple avenues on kind of that enforcement mechanism, but it's not an authority that has been granted to the council.
Thank you.
Although this isn't a public hearing, I understand that we do have someone who would like to speak to this issue. So Russ Adams. Mr. Adams, I will give you 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I think what you have before you is a city that is taking advantage of your process, because in their comp plan, they acknowledge the goals that the Met Council assigned to them, 373 units total. Of that portion, 229 units would be at or below 50% AMI, and that's the goal for the next decade. They acknowledge that they've guided 15.9 acres at the TCAP site, which is the fundamental basis for their entire comp plan in terms of how they're going to reach their growth goals and their affordable housing goals. And so they say that they're setting aside land to do that, which is all they need to do to comply mostly with comp plan requests. And then they say in their master development agreement, the MDA, that they have no intention of meeting those goals. They have no intention of building 229 units of affordable housing. They set the goal in that August 28th document of 146 units, which represents 10% of all residential units that'll be built in the largest undeveloped tract in the city. As the staff just acknowledged, 35% of the land mass in the city. 146 units at 80% AMI. They don't say at or below 80% AMI. They are very clear 80%. So they're making a mockery of your process, and it's an old sort of bait and switch. And the only reason we know this is because they're right in the middle of trying to develop this property, and that, yes, they are in a legal battle with Ramsey County. The mediation is going nowhere. Most cities would try to pull this done after you approve their comp plan. They're doing it right in front of your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Any further discussion by the council? Okay, we will vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have 2019-297 JT, City of Hampton. Oh, excuse me.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen abstained.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen abstained, and I almost gave you a new name. And Musse. Okay. So we had 2 abstentions. All right. Next, we have 2019-297 JT, City of Hampton, Patrick Boylan. Mr. Boylan, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Patrick Boylan. Work with districts 13, 14, 15, and 16. I'm here to talk to you about the City of Hampton. Although they were not able to come today, I just want to put a special thanks publicly to Mary Schultz, who's the clerk there, who's done a fantastic job responding to us and working really well with our staff, and really appreciate everything she's done to help this process along. So, City of Hampton is a very tiny community. It is sort of in the south central, kind of almost in the further south area of the Dakota County. It's completely surrounded by the City of Hampton. Thrive has a designation of
Hampton Township.
Hampton Township. I'm sorry. Thank you. Hampton is designated as rural center and agricultural. The agriculture being the green and the rural center being the yellow, primarily the urbanized areas. The approach the city took is very similar to the city of Coates, Meesville, New Trier that we heard earlier this fall. Very simple approach, very effective approach, I think, to their plan. It's a wintry scene, which seems far away, but it's not. But it's sort of, I thought these 2 pictures were good for 2 reasons. One is that I love the iconic kind of water tower there, and that is in the front section of it's one of the few images of their plan. And then St. Matthew's Catholic Church is a landmark, sort of the crossroads of Northfield Boulevard and County Road 50. And before there was Highway 52, this was the major intersection in that part of the county. Regional systems before you on the map shows, again, the kind of dominant feature is that Highway 52 connecting St. Paul to Rochester. And the forecasted growth is modest. However, discussions with the city clerk and their consultant and council staff revealed a need, a desire to increase the forecast for population households but not employment. So the far right of the table that's in the staff report and before you on the screen shows an increase for 2020, 2030, and 2040, consistently across the board, showing an increase of 40 people representing 40 households, and then no change in the number of jobs. Although the math is that there will be an additional 40 jobs in the city during the same planning time frame. The table 2 from the staff report shown here illustrates the residential density in the rural centers area. So again, that yellow symbol that's on the map, the regional council map. The overall density for the guided residential land expected between 3.79 and 7.17 units per acre. And communities with a rural center designation under Thrive are expected to plan for forecasted population and household growth at average net density of 3 to 5 units. So this does meet that policy. Communities with the agricultural designation and thrive are expected to adopt zoning ordinances and/or official controls to maintain resident densities no greater than 1 unit per 40 acres. And Hampton's plans are consistent with this policy as well. The existing land use, again, is mostly agricultural with clusters of residential and then some commercial areas. The future land use shows additional expansion of the highway commercial industrial areas, which are along Highway 52, which have access to municipal services. The proposed findings in front of us today that the plan conforms to Metropolitan Council system plans. It's consistent with regional policies and the proposed forecast changes shown in the staff report, and that it is compatible with the plans of adjacent local government units and affected jurisdictions. The meeting schedule, like the previous plans, the Environment Committee will see this tomorrow, and then later in early November, the full council will see this. The action before you today is to authorize the City of Hampton to place its 2040 comp plan into effect, to revise the city's forecast upwards as shown at Table 1 of the review record, and to advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for surface water management. Again, there's no one here from the city, but I am available for your questions at this time.
Is there a motion to approve? Councilmember Wolf.
Madam Chair, I would move approval.
And is there a second?
Second.
Lindstrom seconds. Councilmember Wolf.
Thanks. So a couple of things about Hampton. Within the last couple of years, MnDOT did some improvements on Highway 50 where it goes through town. They did some repaving and did drainage improvements along the sides of the road. And when they were doing the land acquisition to get a little more right-of-way for better drainage, they realized that they didn't own some of the parcels underneath the road from older platted lots. So the land acquisition got a little more complicated than they originally thought it was going to be. My cousin was married at that church that was pictured in the report, and Little Oscar's restaurant in town had to go to only serving breakfast and lunch because they can't find enough people to work.
Councilmember Wolf, Little Oscar's is such a part of my family's family lore. Growing up, whenever we'd come to the cities, we were coming up early in the morning. That's where we'd breakfast, and we had to keep our stomachs from growling all the way from a little town south of Rochester to Little Oscar's. Any further discussion? I have one question. This is a very bizarre, off-the-wall question. But as we look at stormwater reuse in our more suburban and urban areas, are there stormwater reuse projects being done in agricultural areas, particularly as it relates to this recent onslaught of stormwater?
Madam Chair and council members, I'm not aware of them, but we can find out for you. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're talking about wide expanses of land, but just a thought, especially given what southeastern Minnesota's gone through. So, okay, was our question asked? All in favor of the motion to approve the Hampton plan, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Our next item is 2019-298 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Funding Recommendations. Hannah Gary and Chair/Mayor Joe Emerson. For those of you who may not know, the chair of the committee, Joe Emerson, is also the chair of White Bear Lake, which is a part of my district. So I get to claim her.
Thank you. I'm Hannah Gary. I coordinate the LCDA program and temporarily also the TOD program. And I'll be co-presenting with Mayor Emerson, who, as you said, is the chair of our Livable Communities Advisory Committee. And this is the external body that reviews our applications and makes the final funding recommendation. So the funding recommendation that you have today is to award 2 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Grants totaling $1,431,800 to table action on the St. Paul Lexington project until the city can demonstrate that neighborhood concerns have been resolved, but no later than November 23rd of 2019. And finally, to authorize its Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. So I'll now give a brief overview of the application and evaluation process. So applicants are required to all submit a project concept plan, which outlines their initial project. And this year, all applicants were also required to attend a brief meeting with Livable Communities staff to discuss their project concept plan, to review eligible activities and ensure that all requests were eligible and that the project itself was eligible. Once submitted, the applications go through a step 1 review process with council staff from different backgrounds of expertise. All applications must score a minimum of 45 points coming out of this step 1 review in order to move into the second round of review with the Livable Communities Advisory Committee. This is a 15-member external review committee with representatives from 7 areas of expertise in community development, and then the 15th member being the chair. This committee reviews the applications based on demonstration value, catalytic value, and readiness. And all applications must have a combined minimum score of at least 75 points without their housing performance score to be recommended for funding. An underlying purpose of the TOD program is to promote moderate to high density development projects located within walking distance of major transit stops that typically include a mix of uses such as housing, jobs, restaurants, shops, and entertainment. For a 6th year this year, the staff has convened a team of top urban designers and architects to provide feedback to applicants on ways to improve the design of proposed projects to best model transit-oriented design and livable communities principles. We offered 2 workshops again this year with the intent that participants attend both sessions so that designers could review the evolution of the project. The fund distribution plan was adopted in February of 2019, and a notice of fund availability was issued. The project concept plans that I described earlier were due on June 1st. This year we had 5 project concept plans, and 4 of those project concept plans ended up being eligible and were submitted at the full application deadline of July 11th. The step 1 technical review took place by an interdivisional team throughout the month of August. And all 4 of the projects that came in through the full application period did meet that minimum score of 45 points and were moved on to the second round of review. And throughout the month of September, all 4 of those projects were reviewed by our Livable Communities Advisory Committee on the categories of TOD model demonstration, catalytic potential, and readiness. And today we are presenting 2 projects for full funding, with 1 being tabled for future discussion. A bit of overview on the funding. So for 2019, the council made a total of $5 million available for the LCDA TOD account, and $500,000 of that is set aside for pre-development projects. Those grants are awarded twice a year, which left $4.5 million available for LCDA development projects, which are the ones coming before you. And we'll now, I'll turn it over to Mayor Emerson to go over the funding recommendations, and we'll go through some of the project highlights from this year.
Thank you. Point totals from step 1 review, the LCAC and housing performance scores were combined to yield a final total. A total of 130 points are possible. The 4 projects forwarded by staff from step 1 met the step 2 minimum threshold of 75 points to be considered for funding. The LCAC is recommending funding for 2 LCDA TOD requests totaling $1,431,800. The LCAC recommended $1,250,000 for the Lexington project. This recommendation is tabled as the city works to resolve concerns with the neighborhood organization. Full funding is being recommended for Bimosita in Minneapolis and the LNH Phase 3 in Minneapolis. Committee awarded funds based on the total score in rank order and also with regard to the $2 million per city limit that applies to the TOD program. No city reached the funding limit. Funding is not being recommended for Snelling Yards because it did not meet the minimum combined score from steps 1 and 2 to be eligible for funding performance, which was 75 points without the housing performance score. We are recommending tabling the award recommendation for the Lexington project until the City of St. Paul resolves concerns with neighborhood organizations. We'll now provide a brief overview of the projects recommended for funding.
So the Bumosada project is a project in the city of Minneapolis. It's an adaptive reuse project in the former Film Exchange building in the North Loop neighborhood in Minneapolis. And it's a partnership with the city of Minneapolis, Beacon Interfaith Housing, and the Red Lake Nation. The project will provide 48 units of permanent supportive housing for individuals experiencing homelessness, chemical dependency, and/or mental illness. Residents with a tribal affiliation will have first priority for housing within this project. It provides affordable housing in a desirable part of Minneapolis that's seeing rapidly rising rents. No parking is part of this project as residents can take advantage of the extensive transit networks going through downtown, and this award will support site acquisition for the project.
LNH Phase 3 is the third of a four-phase development around the light rail station. As a third of a fourth-phase development helps to tie together a larger TOD vision for the station area. This phase adds 114 units of affordable senior housing. Affordability bands range from 31 to 50% AMI and 61 to 80% AMI. The previous phases of the project included 80% AMI housing units and ground level office and retail space. Phase 2 is adding 142 market rate units, and the final phase will add 177 mixed income units with affordability restrictions at 50% of AMI. This award will support the green roof and designing a stormwater management system for this phase. LCA funds previously supported the 2016 TOD grant for $1,361,500.
And the Lexington project, again, the recommendation for this is being tabled as the city works out concerns with a community organization. And they're currently working with the developer and the neighborhood organization to resolve some of those concerns. This project is proposing a mixed-use development with a grocery store, retail, and a small business incubator space. 5% of the 226 proposed units will be affordable. The project will enhance the pedestrian experience in the area by increasing bike connections to the city bike network, expanding the sidewalks, and introducing active ground floor uses. This award would support those enhanced sidewalks, a variable refrigerant system, stormwater management, and the bikeway connection. So overall, and these outcomes listed do not include the Lexington project, but these are the anticipated outcomes of the proposed projects. There would be 12 new permanent jobs and 162 temporary jobs. A net tax capacity increase of $144,480. 162 new housing units, all of which would be affordable. Additional private investment of almost $31 million and public investment of almost $12 million. And finally, the funding recommendation before you is to award 2 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Grants totaling $1,431,800 to table the action on the St. Paul Lexington project until the city can demonstrate neighborhood concerns have been resolved, but no later than November 23rd, 2019. And finally, to authorize its Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Questions? Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I had a question. I'm wondering if you're able to speak on this, what some of the, like a summary of the neighborhood concerns.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. So
I'm wondering if you're able to speak on this, what the summary of the neighborhood concerns are
regarding St. Paul.
regarding the Lexington, St. Paul project.
I don't have the specifics on their concerns, but that's something that we could get back to you on.
Yes, I would, Madam Chair, I would.
I would say if Mr. Burns might have some more detail.
Madam Chair, council members, we don't know the specifics of their concerns, but from what the city staff has told us, the neighborhood organization where the project is located is in support of the project. It's an adjacent neighborhood organization across the street that has expressed that they didn't feel that their concerns were adequately heard. What the specifics are, we don't know.
And there was a representative from the city of St. Paul, but she had to leave for an appointment, but mentioned that she would be willing to answer questions if things came up later.
Madam Chair,
yes,
it would be good to get that information.
Okay. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Just related to that point, understanding that sometimes things don't get resolved. Does the city of St. Paul know what they need to do to have this issue resolved? And just my bottom line of my question is, what does resolved mean?
Maybe I can try that again. Paul Burns, manager, local communities, Madam Chair, and Councilmember Lindstrom. The neighborhood engagement process is really the responsibility of the city. We expect that by the time they come to us, they've worked those things out. The council is not the best venue for airing those issues. So what we've said is you need to come back with some form of documentation of that you've done an adequate job of hearing those concerns and responding to them. We don't necessarily have to see that everybody's happy about it, but that they've done a thorough job of airing those concerns. And again, it's the city that comes to us. Our grants can only be made to the city, so they're the ones that are really responsible for that process. We try to provide resources on how to help them be aware of how to do that. But again, Met Council does not dictate how to do that.
Thank you.
Is there, Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions, actually. You mentioned that there were 5 project concept plans brought forward. Is that the usual number that would be brought forward? Are they more or less right in the ballpark?
Madam Chair, I'll try to respond again because Hannah's been here a year. I've been here for almost 12. So it really varies depending on the market conditions, the amount of other funding available. In recent years on the TOD, the transit-oriented development, we've really tried to counsel applicants, cities and applicants, to really come through with projects that are truly transit-oriented development projects and not just projects that happen to be near a transit station that could be built anywhere. Really trying to further the council's strategic goals on transit-oriented development, and again, not just a conventional project that just happens to be near a transit station.
Great, thank you.
Your second question.
Madam Chair, a separate question, and I'm sure I'm going to say this wrong, but do you know what the word Mimosa Day means?
I do.
She does.
Madam Chair, that's a tough question.
Let's walk together.
Oh,
it means let's walk together in Ojibwe.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's great. Thank you.
Before we go forward, I apologize. Robert's rule says that you're supposed to have a motion and a second before you get into discussion, and I failed to do that. So is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Muse moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Chambliss seconds. Okay, Councilmember Johnson.
So, a couple of questions. So what was the fifth project? And maybe that's in here and as I'm scrolling and reading, but that didn't get enough points?
Sorry.
Madam Chair, I'm
Council-
sorry.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, Chair, Councilmember, thank you. So we had 5 projects come in for the project concept. One of those projects ended up not being eligible to come in given the grant requested activities that they had put in their proposal were not things that we could support through our program. And then there was one project that did not meet the minimum funding recommendation, and that was a Minneapolis project. It was the Snelling Yards project.
Madam Chair?
Councilmember
And
Johnson.
were they all from Minneapolis and St. Paul?
Yes.
And just Madam Chair?
Yes.
And is that typically, are these the big, high-density, transit-oriented, or have we seen these, I mean, I'm sure Southwest, right? But is this typically this large scale, or have these projects kind of found themselves in other parts of the region?
Want me to answer that? Madam Chair, council members, and maybe Anna can remember better than I can. But no, we've funded several projects in Ramsey, Minnesota, and other projects along the North Star Line. Ridley, we've funded a couple of projects and a couple others outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, either on the North Star Line, high-frequency express bus stations in the suburban locations. Anna, am I forgetting?
Since the inception of the program in 2012, I think there typically has been suburban applications coming through in the TOD program.
And Madam Chair, just one last question. So the $1 million too for the Bimosa Day, Bimosa Day, walking together, that's separate from the $1 million that we're talking about in our budget also for homelessness funding. Is this a separate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We did have one individual who wishes to speak, indicate he wishes to speak on this topic. Steve Min from Lupe Development. Again, Mr. Min, you probably heard me mention this to Mr. Adams, but you have 3 minutes. That's fine. That's fine.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Steve Min, and with me is Amy Geisler, who's Manager of Residential Finance at Community Planning and Development in Minneapolis. I would ask you to consider, on behalf of the Snelling Yards project, to modify the staff recommendation and at least move forward with funding for that project to the full council and allow us the time to work with the staff to find out what the design concerns are for that project. And I'll briefly tell you what that project is about. It's 210 units of affordable housing, 100 which are senior, age restricted, and 110 which are workforce, between 30% AMI, 60% AMI. There are 24 homeless veteran units in the total project. This is our second year applying. We are right across the street from the 46th Street LRT station, and we're buying a polluted piece of land from the city of Minneapolis that used to be their East Side Yards. If there's a project that is demonstrating transit orientation with a veteran orientation near the VA hospital that's less than a mile away, across the street from an LRT station, that doesn't meet the criteria of the other projects that are being funded, then I am confused. The Thrive Lens analysis that was used for these other 2 projects conforms to our project. We have a stormwater management system, green roof, an integrated transit plan across the street, and shared resources. And frankly, this project is with 2 partner developers, my firm and the firm of Acumen, which is a large regional senior housing provider. We have a successful project that is exactly like this downtown that's been open for 3 years, where we share resources in the buildings. What I think happened here is somebody on the advisory committee, which we respect their work, just didn't like the design. But I want you to know this was the #1 rated project out of Minneapolis. Minneapolis ranks their projects before they send them over to LCDA. We have been through plan review at the city of Minneapolis and received a conditional approval from the committee of the whole. We have worked for 30 months with the neighborhood group. They love this project. And this design that we're advancing has their support as well as the council member, Andrew Johnson. We made changes to accommodate this neighborhood group. So the dollars are available. I'm not sure why a project that doesn't have underground parking is being faulted for that near an LRT station, but that was a major concern at design committee that we didn't have underground parking. We did it because $25,000 a stall just doesn't make sense in affordable housing anymore across the street from LRT. I've got ramps that are empty because of Lyft and Uber and some of the other buildings we've built. And we have the history and the team players who can demonstrate that these buildings work together. We're very frustrated that for whatever the design reasons that the point score was below the threshold, although I'm confused. The chart that you have says we're at 81. Perhaps that's a math error. If the threshold was 75 and we were actually a 71 score, then I'd like the opportunity to work with the staff between now and then to resolve these issues and let them talk with the Minneapolis planning staff to assuage some of their concerns. Because we think the design, given that it's a challenging site, power lines, and it's polluted, really makes for a nice demonstration of how to use infill, how to use polluted lands, and how to use LRT to make all the goals that you've identified
Time,
in your
Mr.
lens
Min.
analysis work.
Time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Ms. Gary or Mayor Emerson, would you care to respond?
Chair, council members, thank you. I can clarify the scoring question. The points that are listed in the business item that you received do include the housing performance score, and for Minneapolis, that's a housing performance score of 10. So the 81 points that are listed in the business item include that the 10 points for the housing performance score. The minimum score required out of the combined step 1 and step 2 is 75 without the housing performance score. So the raw score for the Snelling Yards project was a 71 rather than an 81.
Mr. Burns, you look like you may want to speak.
Unless the mayor would like to.
Well, I would say some of the things I remember during the deliberation on this, the design team had recommended some changes, and they chose to go with their original plan. And so, you know, I feel it's important we have this design team that's available for them to pick their brains, do whatever, and then if you don't take their advice, well, then it might not work out for you. So that was certainly something. There was some concerns about things they wanted, programming. There were some issues there that weren't clear, and it just didn't make the cut. It's that simple. The scores reflected what the committee thought.
And
Just
Madam,
going to add to that. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to add to that, bring your attention back to this calendar. Our process started in February. We've had dialogue going on ever since then with all the applicants. They've all had the same opportunity. And in terms of a single designer having a problem, all the scores of the 15 member, actually there were 14 this year because we had a vacancy, are averaged. So 14 members' votes were averaged. So it's not just no one person can influence overtly the outcome.
Any for Councilmember Johnson?
And just one follow-up question, Madam Chair. And on this, I heard Mr. Min say that this was the second time that they have approached for this type of funding. Had the design issue been an issue in a last round of funding through the review process?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I don't remember the conversation that occurred last year, but probably fairly similar.
Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen.
Is it possible to share what exactly the design concerns are or were?
Chair, council members, I brought the discussion minutes from the meeting where this project was discussed, and there were specific questions about the way that the two buildings would interact with one another. One of the demonstration elements that was highlighted during the presentation and in the application was this being an intergenerational campus of sorts where the age-restricted senior housing and workforce housing residents, the environmental design would be such that it would encourage interaction, and the design team felt that with that being one of the primary demonstration elements, that was not reflected in the design nor in the programming of the programming and management of the space.
Was that the only concern for design? Chair, sorry.
That's okay.
Madam Chair, council members, I do recall also that as Mr. Min said, there was concern about a surface parking lot being directly adjacent to a future bike trail. And the bike trail was one of the issues about how can you better integrate it into the bike trail. I think there were also questions about how well the senior building was associated with the veterans home. And again, just the physical layout of the two structures was questioned.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, this would have been discovered in September then, throughout the whole process, or was there some foretelling or concerns given?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I don't remember if they came to the February workshop or the April design workshop, but the design issues were identified in the process.
Councilmember Cummings.
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Min makes an interesting presentation. However, I think that clearly the committee spends a great deal of time and there is a process and looks in depth at many things that bring these proposals forward and so forth. I think for me, it would be very difficult to change what has been determined by the committee and staff and so forth who have studied this in depth over the period of months to change that recommendation at this date based on Mr. Min's presentation.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
I guess I would ask the question, given that we don't see a lot of projects that have this level of AMI, and we don't also, I just haven't seen many projects also that have the diversity of age represented here. We've seen senior projects, but frankly, I've been working with homeless youth in St. Paul lately, and we don't see anything that's accessible to them right now. So just knowing we're in such a crisis, I'm just wondering, is there no way to work something out like this, or is there a way to work something out at this point?
Madam Chair, council members, I would strongly urge you not to try to work something out between now and the council meeting. I mean, as we've described, it's a very extensive process that goes to great lengths to ensure fairness. So I would encourage the committee to not try to short circuit that, because it undermines our ability to uphold the standards for future rounds. But I'll give you an example. There was another project right nearby that was unsuccessful in the TOD round last year that is being recommended this year under what we call the regular LCDA program. It's affordable housing project.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was what I was going to suggest, was that perhaps the project would be more successful in the regular program.
Thanks, Councilmember Wolf. That's what I was looking for. Absolutely never looking to short circuit or work around a process, but always looking for us to find ways of, when we have good things that we know we need in our community, how do we figure out how to make them work? Sometimes it's difficult when processes get off or it's not the right fit, but I feel like it's our job just to make sure if there's a way to make it work that makes sense and is appropriate, doing our due diligence that we do. So appreciate that.
Councilmember Wolf and then Councilmember Lindstrom.
Even though Minneapolis scores very well on its housing performance score, so it would be at the bottom of the funding for LHIA, considering it's an all affordable project. That is another possible funding source for the program.
Councilmember Johnson. No, he
No.
took himself off the list. Or he was doing this to me.
And thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm kind of going in two different directions, but I'll focus. So that was kind of going back to my question earlier, in that the other funding sources, everything's, we're all competing for scarce dollars, right? They're all worthy projects. But these are big projects where I can see, obviously, they're on the big transit lines, which is why you don't probably see other communities getting this particular funding. But I just want to be mindful as we kind of try to, maybe even just with our hearts in this one, steer it to maybe something else. There's still process and I get it. There's higher density and there's, great successes, and I want these to be successful, and I stand behind them. But in the other ones too, you just don't want the big projects to outweigh some of those smaller projects throughout the region that might have impact and process and scoring in a different manner. And Madam Chair, one follow up too.
Yes.
So back to St. Paul. So did St. Paul, the city of St. Paul, ask us to hold it up until they resolved this issue? Or did we at Met Council find out there was an issue and say, oh, we want to hold this up?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we heard from a representative of the neighborhood organization that was upset about the project, and I contacted the city and explained that we had been hearing from this neighborhood organization, and that we really felt it was appropriate for the city to resolve this and not have it play out at the council forum.
Kind of like this.
Yeah. And Madam Chair,
Yes.
the only thing I would say about that is a lot of the projects, whether they're getting Met Council funding or they're affordable housing projects or we're trying to create density, you get a lot of entities, organizations, neighborhoods that don't want it. And that is usually just handled at the local level. And so I appreciate the concern and I appreciate process, because trust me, I was 20 plus years in process. It's very important. But my concern is that we are talking about the importance of process, and how many projects that are going through our processes are we going to hold them all up because somebody contacts us? I think if the city is still asking for it and they're not saying slow it down, I just get concerned that we are letting, and again, I want to be inclusive, but I'm not sure that's our lane, and I'm not saying it's not, but it just, had anybody else called up on these, or maybe had people called and said, hey, well, we really want the Snelling yards, then do we go, well, we should send it back to the city? I mean, that's what I'm struggling at on the other one.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. But during the review process, the application stated that they had resolved all the neighborhood issues. They had all the neighborhood organizations on board. And so this is what raised a red flag.
Councilmember Muse, and then Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I will hold my judgment until the specifics. But I want to share that in Minneapolis, I used to oversee neighborhood department, and I used to interact a lot with the neighborhood groups. Some of the neighborhood groups, they were mostly against any inclusive affordable housing in their neighborhood. And sometimes there are only focal 2 or 3 people who are to make a lot of noise, while the majority who need the housing are not showing up. So let's keep that in mind.
Councilmember Johnson, did you have?
Do you want to go?
I wanted to
Get my
I
list
wanted
mixed up.
to agree with that hesitance, because I think we have a number of situations where we receive community input that we may not be doing something and we don't respond in kind or in that way. So I would just caution us from, in agreement with Councilmember Johnson, from taking those kinds of actions into our hands without really being thoughtful and having one process by which we choose to do that, and having that be a transparent decision-making process in some way. I think that leads us to perceptions of certain people having more powerful voice than others, certain communities having more powerful voice than others, and influence on our systems and our decision making. So I just wanted to add my voice to agree with Councilmember Johnson that I think we should really, if we want to start taking, or if we are taking those actions, I'd like that to be something that we're doing with a full understanding and appreciation for council members weighing in on that process.
Councilmember Johnson and then Councilmember Wolf.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm really trying to stick with process, because I think ultimately, if the city wants to move forward on this, it is up to them to resolve this either way. But if they are not withdrawing, because we might find out that whoever has the concern out there, that's been resolved, and the next day somebody else pops up. And by delaying, now there's more leverage out there to resolve the problem. So I don't even know what it is. I just am speaking from experience that that worries me. And then my second part is, so if they don't resolve it, by which standard, I'm not sure we're measuring, because boy, I've got a lot of experience in that one too. So I don't know what the criteria would be to say, yep, check the box, they resolved it. Because who are we, who are we trying to satisfy, and who are they representing? But then if that funding doesn't go forward, then do any of these others move up in the queue? That's all I'm trying to find out and I'm about process.
It wouldn't change the points though, so
No.
it's not going to affect the other requests. It's not going to change the point system. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since this is the first time through all of this for all of you, I was just going to point out that until 2012 or so, we didn't have a TOD program. There was one Livable Communities Demonstration Account program. And since then, we've been deciding each year how much money goes into each one, and it can shift back and forth between the two if one is oversubscribed and one is undersubscribed. And if neither one of them gets fully subscribed, you can roll it over to the next year. Money's not going to go away. And the division of money between the two different accounts is arbitrary based on whatever the council as a group decides to do.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion carried. Before you folks leave, I want to thank you, Hannah. I want to thank you, Mayor Emerson. Appreciate this process. Thank you, Mr. Min, for coming and speaking to us. And Mr. Burns, I understand that this is your last committee meeting with us, and that after 12 years of extraordinary service to the Met Council, you're departing on November 1st.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Well, on behalf of the committee and the council, I want to thank you. This is tough work, and you came to this organization well prepared, because I understand you had, well, for total, including Met Council, you've got like 40 years of public service. So thank you. That's not easy.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Well, we've learned a lot from you and from Hannah and from Joe and from the entire team. So thank you very much.
Thank
and
you,
best
Madam
wishes.
Chair, and I hope you keep up the good work.
Our next agenda
Madam Chair,
item.
Before I go, may I just say, the committee, this is my first year serving as chair, but the committee I worked with are very dedicated. They're hardworking. They know their business. They're good people, and I learned a lot from them this year. And I'll be back for the next round of grants, but but anyway, we also came up with a perception. We want to dispel the perception that just because you apply, you're guaranteed a grant. We feel very strongly people need to know that's not the case. So
That's good.
for what it's worth, that's kind of where we are. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The committee has good leadership. Our next item is 2019-299, adoption of utility allowance schedule for Metro HRA rent assistance programs. Somebody named Terry Smith.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Smith. I'm the director of the Council's Housing Authority. I'm here today to request your approval of the new utility allowance schedule for use in the Metro HRA's rent assistance programs. A utility allowance is really a credit for tenant-paid utilities. When a tenant moves into a unit, tenants sometimes pay the utilities and landlords sometimes pay. If there's a case where a tenant pays utilities, they then get a credit for those utilities against their rent amount. Utility allowances are provided for utilities is considered essential for a housing unit, like heat and electricity and sewer and water and all of those things. There are some times when we give a credit if the tenant has to provide their own range or refrigerator. I don't have any of those right now, but I've seen it happen, so we also provide an allowance for that. And then the allowance that we give are based on typical utility costs, average utility costs for average consumption for energy conservative households. And the data is obtained from local utility providers, so a variety of local utility providers. The schedule is required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and is used in the calculation of rent assistance for the Housing Choice Voucher Program and some of our other programs. It's used to determine the total housing costs for families. So total housing costs meaning tenant rent portion and tenant paid utilities. The allowances must be established, of course, but then the rates are reviewed annually, and HUD requires a change in any utility allowance amount that changes by 10% or more, and that's a cumulative change since that rate was last changed. So just a little bit about how we calculate rent. Total tenant payment, so tenants pay about 30% of their income towards rent. And that's towards their total housing costs, so tenant rent and utilities. So rent plus their tenant paid utilities. The tenant rent to owner is 30% of their income minus the utility allowance. I'll show you a chart on the next slide that will help illustrate this. And then the HRA payment is the rent minus the tenant rent, is the payment that the HRA makes to the landlord. This chart is just an example to show you how that works. So person A is living in a one-bedroom apartment. Let's say that contract rent is $900 a month. The tenant in this case pays for electricity and lights, for lights and cooking, and then when the tenant lives in an apartment. So the gross rent on this unit is $944. This tenant's total monthly income, let's say, is $1,300 a month. 30% of that, so 30%, they pay 30% towards their total housing costs, and that's $390 for this tenant. And we subtract out the utility allowance, so they get a credit for their paying for their own electricity and cooking stove directly to the utility company. So the check that they're going to write, or the payment they make to the owner every month, is going to be $346. So that's inclusive of the tenant paid utilities, and it's again totaling 30% of their income. And then the housing authority's payment is the contract rent minus the tenant portion, equals the amount that the HRA pays directly to the landlord. So this is the utility rate review results. Really minimal change this year, but here's each utility that we look at, and then when that rate was updated. So you can see some of them were last updated in 2016. We updated some last year in 2018, but I think the two biggies are natural gas and electricity. Those two utility amounts have not changed by 10% or more since 2016. So the two utility rates that are required to be changed this year are water, because that rate increased by 13.8%, and then trash, which increased by 13.8%. However, we do have 1,640 households that pay either water, trash, or both, so that's 22% of the families that we serve. And the increase in allowance that the tenants will experience is between $1 and $4. And so the tenants will get an increased allowance amount of $1 to $4, and that difference is based on bedroom size. So a $1 change for someone that's in a one-bedroom apartment, someone in a four-bedroom apartment would get a $4 change in their utility allowance. So the tenant's rent goes down. This results in the housing authority payment going up by $1 or $4. So really, in the big scheme of the budget and the overall HRA budget, the impacts to the council are minimal. It will cost the council an additional $17,000 or so per year to implement these utility cost changes. And that same benefit will be reduce the tenant rent portions by the same amount. And so the action before you today is that the Metropolitan Council adopt amounts listed in the business item as payment standards. I don't know where that came from. That's supposed to say utility allowances. for the Housing Choice Voucher and other rent assistance programs effective January 1st, 2020. And I also should say, since this says payment standards inadvertently, I intended to bring a rent limits and payment standard discussion for you today as an information item. Talk about setting rent limits for the program, but we're not quite there yet. They're quite complicated this year, and so we need 2 more weeks to do some more analysis. So I will be back before you with that discussion for an information item in November. But with that, I'll answer questions today about the utility allowances for those that have them.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Chambliss moves, second.
Second.
Atlas Ingebrigtsen seconds. Any discussion? Councilmember Lindstrom.
We work with our landlords to encourage energy efficiency.
Councilmember Vento and Lindstrom, we provide information, so we partner, for example, with a nonprofit called Energy Sense and market their programs to all of our landlords, for example, to encourage energy efficient building. The council owns, as you know, 150 units of housing. We had an operational assessment completed this summer. One of the things that we're looking at is energy efficiency. We provide information to landlords, newsletters, and owner workshops about energy efficiency. Of course, we don't have any control over that, but we do try to provide helpful information to encourage that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Are there any incentives, or have we ever provided any incentives around energy efficiency or partnered with anyone?
Councilmember Vento, other than the Energy Sense program, we have never had a pot of money to provide incentives to landlords to conduct energy efficiency outside of providing resources.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen and then Jill.
Thank you. And then with the properties we own, are there exciting things that we're doing around energy efficiency there, or?
So Councilmember Vento and Chair Vento, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, we are, when we replace windows, we replace with energy efficient windows. We are replacing with energy efficient furnaces, water heaters. We only purchase Energy Star certified equipment for the council homes. And when we recently had the physical needs assessment, the units are in pretty good shape, and there aren't any, for example, windows in that needs assessment for 5 years or something. I'm just guessing, but it's something like that. So it's not like glaring things came back about energy efficiency with our homes, because a lot of that work has been done on them.
Councilmember Johnson.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing no further, hearing no further discussion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Any additional business for the committee? Hearing none, motion, well, we don't need a motion, we're adjourned.